She sent me the bill for $800. That was the line that popped up on my phone, plain and cold, like it was a normal thing for one human being to drop into another's lap. No explanation, no apology, not even a please, just a demand. 800. I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering over the screen, the number burning itself into my eyes. My first reaction wasn't anger, it was disbelief. A small laugh even slipped out of me. Like, of course she did this. I had been sitting at the kitchen counter when the message arrived, my coffee going lukewarm beside me. The kids' backpacks were slumped by the door, evidence of another long school day. My husband was still at work, buried in meetings, oblivious to the small battlefield that had just opened in our family. And there I was, holding the grenade. $800. Not 20, not 50, 800. For what? For dinner? For groceries? For some family event I didn't even get to enjoy? I didn't need to scroll too far back to remember. Just 2 nights before, we had all gone out to celebrate my father-in-law's birthday. A big table, too many people, loud chatter echoing against the walls of the restaurant. I remember walking in, already nervous about how the night would unfold. Family dinners with my mother-in-law were never simple meals. They were tests. She greeted me with that polished smile, the one that never touched her eyes. "Sit anywhere you like," she said, waving vaguely at the table, which was already half full. I slid into a chair near the end, trying to make myself small, unnoticed. The menu was thick, heavy with steakhouse bravado. I ordered something modest, chicken and a side salad, while others rattled off requests for lobster, wine, and desserts, like the bill was a fairy tale that disappeared when midnight struck. I should have known then. All night, I played my part, smiled when appropriate, nodded along with conversations that had nothing to do with me, pretended not to hear the digs slipped into casual remarks. "You're so quiet tonight," my sister-in-law teased, like she hadn't cornered every conversation. "You're not much of a foodie, are you?" my mother-in-law asked, as the server placed my modest plate in front of me. I swallowed each jab like tasteless bread. My fork moved, but my appetite didn't. My mind was busy keeping score, though I would never say it out loud. Then came the check. I didn't even see it land. One moment, laughter and clinking glasses. The next, my mother-in-law with a pen in her hand, scribbling something across the slip of paper, like a queen signing an edict. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. The waiter nodded, collected the folder, and left. I thought nothing of it. Maybe they had split it evenly. Maybe someone else had offered to cover it this time. Hope makes fools of us all. 2 days later, my phone told me the truth. $800. My share. Her words, not mine. My chest tightened. 800 was more than half our mortgage payment. It was groceries for weeks. It was new shoes for the kids, a car repair we'd been putting off, and she wanted me to hand it over as though it were spare change. I put the phone down, pressed my palms flat against the counter, and breathed. For years, I had been playing along, paying when asked, smiling when cornered, swallowing the bitterness so the family could keep pretending everything was fine. But something cracked inside me at that moment. Instead of reaching for my wallet, I opened the banking app. My fingers moved almost on their own, calm and deliberate. I typed 1.00, $1, not 800, 1. Then in the memo line, I wrote 6 words. For your memory, not mine. I hit send. My heart thudded once, twice, and then a strange lightness spread through me. It wasn't just about the money. It was about finally saying no. Saying it in a way that couldn't be argued with, twisted, or ignored. I leaned back on the stool and stared at the phone, waiting. 10 seconds. Nothing. 30. Nothing. Then the screen lit up like fireworks. First, a call. I let it buzz. Then a message. Did you make a mistake? Another. You're being childish. A third. Call me back right now. Ugh. I didn't. I poured the cold coffee down the sink and refilled the mug with water instead. The next few hours were a blur of buzzing notifications. Her outrage arrived in waves, each one louder than the last. At first, confusion, then anger, then guilt-laced jabs about family loyalty. My husband texted me in the middle of a meeting. "What's going on?" Mom says you refused to pay? I wrote back simply, I paid what was fair. He didn't reply right away. I imagined him pinching the bridge of his nose, caught in the familiar tug of war between his mother's demands and his wife's boundaries. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. By evening, the messages had turned into threats. We'll talk about this at dinner tomorrow. You can't get away with this kind of disrespect. You owe us more than money. Each sentence was like a chain she was trying to fasten back around my neck. But it didn't work this time. The lock was broken. I sat on the couch, children's laughter drifting from the living room, the smell of spaghetti sauce simmering on the stove, and I felt something I hadn't in years. Control. It was only $1, but it was also everything. A declaration. A refusal to be the silent ATM machine they thought I was. A note she would never forget, because it wasn't written in ink. It was written in action. That night, as I tucked the kids into bed, my phone buzzed one more time. A final message from her. We'll see about this. Short, sharp, dripping with venom. I kissed my daughter's forehead, turned off the light, and whispered to myself, yes, we will. I didn't know yet how messy things would get, how far she would go to regain the power she felt slipping through her hands. But I did know one thing. For the first time, I was ready to meet her on equal ground. Because $800 might buy a dinner. But $1, sent with purpose, bought me back my voice. The morning after I sent that $1, the kitchen felt strangely calm. Sunlight filtered in through the blinds, stripes of gold cutting across the counter where the phone had buzzed itself into exhaustion the night before. My husband was sipping coffee, glancing at me like I had grown a second head. You really sent just $1? He asked softly, as if the walls might repeat it to his mother. Yes, I said, pouring milk into the kids' cereal bowls. And a note, a short one. Huh. He didn't answer right away. He just looked down into his mug, swirling the dark liquid like he could find courage at the bottom. I knew what he was thinking. He was thinking about the fallout. He was thinking about the dinner parties, the family texts, the endless gossip that his mother orchestrated like a maestro with her baton. But I was thinking about something else. I was thinking about how different things had once seemed. When I first married into the family, I believed meals together were supposed to be warm, shared laughter, the passing of bread, stories that stitched generations together. My mother-in-law had even promised me that. We're a close family, she said on the night before our wedding. We always look out for one another. I wanted to believe her. For years, I clung to that promise. So every time she invited us to dinner, I dressed carefully, packed snacks for the kids, and tried to put on my best smile. I expected kindness. I expected belonging. I expected, foolishly, to be treated as an equal. But reality had a way of slapping the hope out of me. The dinners weren't celebrations. They were stages. Stages where she directed every scene, where I was cast as the background character, and where the spotlight always landed on someone else. I remember one evening in particular, a Christmas years ago, she had told me, just bring yourself. I showed up with a homemade pie anyway, thinking it might please her. She took it, set it on the counter without a word, and 10 minutes later, introduced a store-bought cheesecake as the highlight dessert. Look what I found at the bakery, she announced proudly, holding it up like a trophy. Everyone clapped. My pie sat untouched until the end of the night when it quietly disappeared into the trash. That was when I first felt the sting of being useful but invisible. And yet I kept showing up. I told myself family wasn't perfect. I told myself she didn't mean it. I told myself that if I kept trying, one day I would be folded into the circle instead of left on the edge. Over the years, the requests started small. Could you grab the check this time? She'd say with a smile, slipping the leather folder across the table. You're so generous. I thought it was occasional, a rare favor. But occasional turned into expected. Expected turned into demanded. The night of the $800 dinner wasn't an accident. It was the natural progression of years of entitlement. They ordered and laughed, secure in the knowledge that I would cover it. Because I always did. Sitting at the table that night, I watched them toast with expensive wine. I watched plates of lobster and prime rib land in front of them. My sister-in-law snapped photos of every course. My mother-in-law leaned back in her chair, satisfied, already writing the script of who would pay and how. And me? I poked at my chicken and salad, telling myself not to mind. I had expected, at the very least, that someone would acknowledge the imbalance. A thank you, a gesture, a hand reaching for the bill. Instead, there was silence. Only the scrape of forks and the hum of indulgence. I remember the walk back to the car afterward, the cold air biting my cheeks. My daughter tugged on my sleeve and asked if she could have dessert when we got home. "They didn't save me any cake," she whispered. I squeezed her hand and told her we'd make brownies together. Inside, though, I felt the weight of something heavier than hunger. It was the weight of being taken for granted. That was my expectations shattered into pieces. I had gone into that evening hoping for warmth, maybe even a moment of connection. I had left with nothing but an empty wallet and a hollow ache. So when that text came 2 days later, cold and clinical, demanding $800 as if I had volunteered for the role of banker, I felt the years collapse into a single moment. Every untouched pie, every silent thank you, every shrugged dismissal, all of it condensed into those 3 digits. 8, 0, 0. And that is why I sent $1, a symbol as sharp as glass. As I sat in the kitchen the next morning, watching my husband wrestle with his silence, I thought about how expectations can blind you. You tell yourself stories about family. You hope they are true. But sometimes the stories are fairy tales, and the villains aren't strangers. "Are you ready for what comes next?" my husband finally asked. I looked him straight in the eye. "I've been ready for years," I said. The kids giggled from the living room, cartoons blaring, completely unaware of the invisible war happening in the adult world. And maybe that was a good thing. They didn't need to see the battlefield yet. They only needed to know that their mother wasn't going to bow anymore. I rinsed the cereal bowls, stacked them in the dishwasher, and let the water run hot over my hands. It felt cleansing, almost symbolic. The night before had been the end of something, and this morning was the beginning of something else. I would no longer expect fairness from people who thrived on control. I would no longer hope for kindness from those who only knew how to take. My expectations had been rewritten, not by choice but by necessity. From that day forward, I promised myself my actions would be my answer. People always ask, "How did it get this bad?" As if families wake up one morning and suddenly decide to turn on each other. But the truth is, it never starts with a bomb. It starts with a drip. A steady, almost invisible stream of little things that wear you down until one day you realize you are soaked through and cold, and it has been raining for years. For me, the first drip came early in my marriage. I had barely been in the family for 6 months when my mother-in-law made it clear that I was expected to take on certain responsibilities. The word she used was help, but the reality was different. It was during a barbecue at her house. Everyone was outside, laughing over burgers, sipping wine, the kids chasing each other across the lawn. When the trays of food were finished, she handed me the stack of dirty dishes. Not her daughter, not her husband, not even my husband, just me. "You don't mind, right?" she said, with a smile that wasn't a question. I washed plates for an hour while they toasted to family. That night, I told myself it was a one-time thing. It wasn't. The next time was at Thanksgiving. We were seated at a long table, silverware glinting under the chandelier. My sister-in-law raised her glass to make a toast. "To family," she said sweetly, "and to being the only true daughter." Laughter rippled around the table, some nervous, some cruel. I forced a smile, pretending it didn't sting. Later, when I mentioned it to my husband, he said, "She probably didn't mean it that way." But I knew better. Christmas came. I spent days preparing thoughtful gifts, small but personal. A scarf I had knitted for my mother-in-law, carefully wrapped in gold paper. She unwrapped it in front of everyone, glanced at it, and set it aside without a word. Then she lifted the perfume bottle from my sister-in-law and announced, "This is exactly my favorite." Everyone applauded her taste. My scarf never left its box. It did not take long to realize I had been cast in a role. Not the cherished daughter-in-law, not the partner in family celebrations. I was the extra, the outsider, the person who filled the gaps so others could shine. Money became the sharpest weapon. The first time they asked me to pay for something, it was disguised as fairness. "Let's split the bill evenly," My mother-in-law said after a dinner where I had ordered a simple sandwich while others feasted on steak and champagne. I paid my share without protest, even though it was more than half my week's grocery budget. But fairness faded quickly. Soon it was not about splitting, it was about covering. There was always a reason. My sister-in-law's card had a problem. My father-in-law had forgotten his wallet. My mother-in-law would say, "You're young, you can handle it. We'll pay you back." They never did. Each time, I told myself it was small. 50 here, 100 there. But the numbers grew. 200, 400, and finally 800. Always with the same expectation. Always with the same silence after the money was gone. What cut deeper than the money was the erasure. The way they made me invisible, even as I was holding them up. At birthday parties, I was never mentioned in speeches. At family reunions, I was cropped out of photos, the group framed perfectly without me. When I confronted my mother-in-law once, she smiled and said, "Oh, you worry too much. It's not intentional." But the pattern was too clear to be accidental. The years stacked on top of each other, like heavy boxes in a closet. Each slight, each dismissal, each dollar unpaid, all shoved into a corner until I could barely breathe. I tried to talk to my husband, but he was caught between loyalty and love. He hated confrontation. His answer was always, "It's just how she island. Don't let it get to you." But it did get to me. It gnawed at me in quiet moments, when I was folding laundry or packing lunches. It whispered at night when I lay awake, replaying her words, her smirks, her calculated silences. One memory sticks with me more than the others. It was my daughter's 6th birthday. We hosted a small party at our house. Balloons taped to the walls, cupcakes with too much frosting, kids screaming with sugar energy. My mother-in-law arrived late, sweeping into the room with a large gift bag. Everyone turned as she pulled out a bright pink dress, sequins catching the light. She held it up and announced, "This is what a real birthday present looks like." Then she leaned closer to my daughter and whispered loudly enough for me to hear, "Now you can outshine your mommy." I smiled for the guests, but inside, something cracked. It wasn't just about me anymore. She was teaching my daughter that love was conditional, that gifts were weapons, that family could be used to humiliate. That was the real betrayal. Not just the insults, not just the money, but the way she planted poison in the soil where my children stood. By the time the $800 bill arrived, I wasn't just reacting to a single offense. I was responding to years of being diminished, erased, and drained. That $1 I sent back wasn't simply about rejecting her demand. It was about reclaiming my place, about telling her, without shouting, that I had seen every drip of rain, and I was done standing in the storm. So when people ask, why not just pay and keep the peace? I smile now, because peace built on silence is not peace, it is surrender. And I had surrendered long enough. The bill for $800 was the last straw, yes. But the fight began long before that. It began the first time I was handed dirty dishes while others laughed. It began the first time a toast erased me. It began every time my wallet was lighter and my worth ignored. And it ends with me. The text with the $800 bill sat on my phone like a challenge. I stared at it until the screen dimmed, then lit it back up with my thumb, reading the message again and again. No explanation, no breakdown, not even a softening emoji, just the amount. 800. It might as well have said, "You owe me. Pay now." I felt my stomach turn. It was not the number itself, though it was absurd. It was what the number represented. Every unacknowledged sacrifice, every insult swallowed, every dinner where I was expected to smile and pay for the privilege of being ignored. That number was the sum of years of silence. I sat at the table, hands flat against the wood, and tried to calm my breathing. The kids were in the other room watching cartoons, their laughter bouncing off the walls like little reminders of why I couldn't let this continue. If I gave in again, what lesson would I teach them? That it is acceptable to be used by the very people who claim to love you? That respect is optional if you carry a checkbook? Number, not anymore. I opened my banking app. My fingers moved deliberately, almost ceremoniously. I typed in 1.00. Just $1. A single coin in the ocean of her entitlement. And in the memo line, I wrote 6 words that felt sharper than any scream. For your memory, not mine. I hit send. The confirmation flashed across the screen. My chest tightened, then loosened all at once, as though I had been holding my breath for years and finally exhaled. I did not slam a door. I did not shout. I did not throw a glass against the wall. I sent a single dollar, and with it, the weight of my refusal. The reaction came quickly. My phone buzzed within minutes. First a call. I let it ring until it stopped. Then a message. Did you make a mistake? Another followed. This is insulting. Fix it now. Then, sharper. You are embarrassing yourself. I placed the phone face down on the table and poured myself a glass of water. My hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with the adrenaline of defiance. For the first time in years, I had not folded. I had not given her what she demanded. The power shifted, even if only slightly, and I could feel it. When my husband came home later, he found me sitting on the couch, phone buzzing beside me like an angry wasp. He glanced at the screen, saw his mother's name flashing, and sighed. What did you do? I paid her, I said evenly. He frowned. All of it? $1, I answered. His eyebrows shot up. You can't be serious. I am, I said. Deadly serious. He rubbed his forehead like he was trying to smooth out the worry lines. You know she won't let this go. I know, I said. That's the point. He sat down beside me, silent for a long time. Finally, he whispered. She's already called me twice at work. She said you're trying to humiliate her. I let out a dry laugh. Humiliation? I've been humiliated for years. All I did was send her back a mirror. The phone buzzed again, another message lighting up the screen. I didn't pick it up. Instead, I leaned back against the cushions, listening to the sound of my children playing in their room. Their voices were like anchors, pulling me back to what mattered. Later that night, as I tucked them into bed, I heard the phone buzzing again from the kitchen. I ignored it. I kissed my daughter's forehead, pulled the blanket up to my son's chin, and whispered goodnight. The buzzing could wait. When I finally checked the phone, the messages had multiplied. Some were pleading, think about family. Others were threatening, you will regret this. And then the one that made my blood run cold. We'll talk about this tomorrow. Don't make me come over. I placed the phone down slowly, the words echoing in my head. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control. She was desperate to pull me back into line, to make sure I remembered my place. But she had underestimated how much had changed. I slept lightly that night, my dreams filled with echoes of her voice, always commanding, always dismissing. I woke before dawn, the house still and quiet. I sat by the window, coffee warming my hands, and thought about how far things had come. It struck me then that my action, the single dollar, was more than a refusal. It was a declaration of independence. For years, I had been conditioned to believe that saying no would shatter everything. But nothing had shattered. The sun still rose. My children still laughed. The world had not ended. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. Sharp, insistent, like she was trying to beat her authority into the wood. I froze, mug halfway to my lips. My husband looked at me, eyes wide. He knew who it was. Don't open it, I whispered. We sat in silence until the knocking stopped. Then came the buzzing phone again, the angry texts, the barrage of guilt. But I didn't give in. Not this time. That single dollar had cost me nothing and gained me everything. It was a small coin in her account, but in my heart, it was a revolution. It was proof that I could stand up without raising my voice. Proof that I could reclaim myself with one quiet act. I knew the storm was far from over. She would escalate. She always did. But now, I was no longer afraid of the rain, because I had finally found my umbrella. The day after I sent that single dollar, the tension in the house was thick enough to choke on. My husband barely spoke at breakfast. He kept glancing at his phone, sighing, putting it down, picking it up again. I knew who was on the other end. His mother. By mid-morning, the buzzing was relentless. Calls, messages, voicemails stacked one after the other. Finally, I silenced the phone completely and slipped it into the drawer. I wasn't going to let her voice echo through my walls anymore. Around noon, there was a knock. Not a gentle one. 3 sharp, deliberate pounds that rattled the door. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. My heart hammered anyway. My husband froze in the hallway. His face went pale. "She came," he whispered, as though saying it out loud might summon something worse. "Stay here," I said quietly. I opened the door just enough to step outside, pulling it shut behind me, and there she was. My mother-in-law, standing with her arms crossed, her expression sharp enough to cut glass. She wore her usual air of confidence, the kind that dared anyone to challenge her. "You embarrassed me," she said, her voice low but heavy. "You think sending me $1 makes you clever? It makes you childish." I held her gaze. "It makes me free." Her eyes narrowed. "Free? From what? From family? From responsibility? You married into this family. That means you pull your weight. You don't get to humiliate us because you feel like it." I let her words hang there, sharp and ugly. For years I would have swallowed them, nodded, apologized even when I had done nothing wrong. But not now. "I pulled my weight," I said firmly. "I pulled more than my weight. I paid when no one else did. I stayed quiet when you cut me out of photos. I smiled when you erased me in front of others. I carried the burden while you pretended it was yours. That stops now." She scoffed, shaking her head. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You're young. You don't understand sacrifice. We've given you everything." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Everything? You've taken everything. My time, my money, my dignity. And when I asked for respect, you handed me a bill instead." Her face tightened. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, like a hairline crack in glass, but she covered it quickly with a sneer. "You're ungrateful," she said. "After all we've done for you, this is how you repay us. With shame, with disrespect." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Number. What I sent you wasn't shame. It was a reminder. $1 that said I'm not your wallet. I'm not your servant. I'm not invisible." For a long moment, she said nothing. We stood on the porch, the air between us buzzing with everything unspoken. Finally, she leaned in. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Families don't forgive betrayal." I straightened my shoulders. "Maybe they don't, but I don't forgive exploitation." Her mouth opened, then closed. She seemed almost stunned that I hadn't broken, that I hadn't folded like I always did. She turned sharply, heels clicking against the pavement as she stormed back to her car. The engine roared, and within seconds, she was gone. I stood there, the echo of her words still ringing in my ears, but beneath it all, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Strength. When I went back inside, my husband was waiting in the hallway. His expression was unreadable. "What did she say?" "That I'll regret it," I said simply. He swallowed hard. "And will you?" I met his eyes. "Number. For the first time, I won't." The rest of the day passed in strange quiet. The kids came home from school, chattering about spelling tests and playground games, blissfully unaware of the storm raging around them. I cooked dinner, listened to their laughter, and reminded myself why I had done it. Not for revenge, for freedom. But the silence didn't last long. That evening, the group chat lit up. My sister-in-law chimed in first. "How could you do this to Mom?" she wrote. "She's devastated. You embarrassed her in front of everyone." Then my father-in-law added his piece. "We raised you better than this. Family helps each other. You need to apologize." I stared at the words, feeling a familiar heat in my chest. Before, I would have typed back something apologetic, desperate to smooth things over. But now, I typed a single sentence: "I already paid." Then I set the phone down. The backlash was immediate. Message after message poured in, each one sharper than the last. But I didn't respond. I let their anger echo into the void. Later that night, as I sat on the porch watching the sky darken, my husband joined me. He was quiet for a long time before speaking. "She won't stop, you know. She'll keep pushing until you give in." I took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill my lungs. "Then she'll be pushing against a wall," I said. He looked at me, really looked, as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. And then he nodded slowly. "Maybe it's time someone stood up to her. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. Maybe more messages, maybe more visits, maybe louder threats. But tonight, as I close my eyes, I feel a strange peace. Because I faced her. I didn't shout, I didn't cry, I didn't crumble. I stood on that porch, and I told her the truth. And whether she admits it or not, she heard me. The night after she stormed away from my porch, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet, the children asleep, my husband breathing steadily beside me. But my mind refused to rest. Every word she had thrown at me replayed in sharp detail, like echoes bouncing inside my skull. Ungrateful. Childish. You'll regret this. I turned those words over and over, asking myself if there was truth in them. Was I ungrateful? Number I had given more than anyone had a right to expect. Was I childish? Number I had been patient for years, swallowing insult after insult until there was nothing left to swallow. Would I regret it? That was the only question that lingered. Morning brought no answers, only another flood of messages. This time, the family group chat was quieter, but the tone was harsher. My sister-in-law wrote, "Mom says you're out of control. You're ruining the family's reputation." My father-in-law added, "We can't trust you anymore. You don't belong in this circle if you can't show respect." I read the words carefully, then closed the app without replying. The strange thing was, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. They had finally said out loud what they had shown me for years in silence. I was never truly part of their family. I was only a tool, a seat filler, a wallet. When I walked into the kitchen, my husband was already there, pouring coffee. He looked tired, older somehow, like the weight of his mother's disapproval had pressed years into his face overnight. "They want us to come over tonight," he said quietly. I leaned against the counter, arms folded. "Do you want to go?" His eyes flickered to mine, searching. "I don't know. Part of me feels like we should. I don't know. To show we're still willing to talk." "And the other part?" I asked. He hesitated. "The other part thinks they'll never change. No matter what we do, it'll never be enough." That part, I thought, was the part I had been living in for years. I shook my head. "I'm not going. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. They can shout into the void if they want, but I'm done handing them the microphone." He studied me for a long moment, then finally nodded. "All right. Then we won't go." The day passed in a haze of ordinary life. I helped the kids with homework, folded laundry, stirred a pot of soup while the smell filled the house. On the surface, everything was normal, but underneath, I could feel the shift. The ground was different now. I was different now. That evening, just as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange, there was another knock. Softer this time, but insistent. My husband went to the door and peered through the peephole. "It's her," he whispered. My pulse quickened, but I shook my head. "Don't open it." We sat in silence as the knocking continued, then stopped, then started again. Finally, it ceased altogether. I imagined her standing there on the porch, furious that the door did not obey her presence, that her authority did not stretch into my walls anymore. Later that night, a single text arrived from her number. "You'll regret shutting us out. Families don't forget." I stared at it for a long time before setting the phone down. The threat hung in the air, heavy and sour, but it didn't move me like it once would have. Instead, I thought about the word she used. Families. Did a family really erase someone in photos? Did a family demand money without gratitude? Did a family teach children that their mother was disposable? If that was family, then maybe I was better off without it. Days turned into a week. The messages slowed but never fully stopped. My sister-in-law tried new tactics, sending me photos of gatherings, smiling faces arranged neatly without me. "See what you're missing?" she wrote once. I didn't reply. My father-in-law left a voicemail saying, "We still love you, but you need to apologize. That's the only way forward." I saved it, not as a reminder of love, but as proof of manipulation. Through it all, I carried myself differently. I walked taller. My voice felt steadier. Even at work, people noticed. "You seem lighter," a colleague remarked one afternoon. And maybe I was. Maybe shedding years of silent resentment makes you lighter, even if the process leaves scars. One evening, I sat on the porch with my daughter curled against me, her hair smelling of shampoo and childhood. She looked up at me with wide eyes and asked, Mom, why was Grandma so mad? I brushed a strand of hair from her face. Because sometimes people get angry when they can't control others anymore. Did you do something wrong? She asked. I shook my head slowly. No, sweetheart. I just said no. She thought about that for a moment, then smiled softly. I'm glad you did. Her words settled into me like warm sunlight. In that moment, I knew that even if the rest of the family never understood, my children would. They would see that standing up for yourself is not selfish. It is survival. Now, as I sit here writing these words, the house is quiet again. The storm outside has not disappeared, but it no longer rages inside me. My mother-in-law may still believe she holds the power, but I know the truth. She lost it the moment I sent that $1. I do not know what tomorrow will bring. Maybe more calls. Maybe another confrontation. Maybe silence. But I do know this. I am no longer afraid of any of it. Because in the end, it was never about the $800. It was about worth, about dignity, about refusing to let someone write the story of my life while I sit in the corner as a footnote. So I'll leave you with this question, the same one I ask myself. If someone handed you a bill for $800 that represented years of disrespect, what would you pay? Would you hand over the money and the power with it? Or would you send $1 and finally reclaim your voice?